allow me to introduce you to Jen. She's a CPA with a CMA and over 15 years of experience in empowering small and medium business owners in areas of finance and accounting. She excels in providing business owners with tools and strategies to feel confident in taking ownership of their personal and business finances. She works exclusively through word of mouth and referrals, which is great because this is the type of environment where we do that. Jen, over to you.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. Go ahead and share my screen.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm going to pin you as our speaker. I think. Or not.
Just let me know when we're good to go.
Okay, you should be good to go.
Okay, so thanks everyone for joining in today. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I think it's something that many business owners can relate to, which is the stress of tax time. So whether you are filing your taxes as a sole proprietor or you have an incorporated company, you've probably been faced with that anxiety at stress time, which thanks to COVID, some of the deadlines have been extended. So you may have actually very recently been experiencing this anxiety and this stress. And so one of the things that I help with is I help clients to get better organized, understand their books, and basically make it so tax time isn't something to be dreaded, but just another task to be completed. So as Bernie had introduced, I am a CPA with several years experience in helping small and medium businesses and consulting and everything to do with finances and accounting. You may also recognize my face from my other business, Upspace, which is an online marketplace for the on-demand short-term rental of commercial space. So I'm going to be going over 5 tips today. And these tips are more on the, I would say, softer side of business. So we're not going to be delving into the technicalities about accounting or tax. We're really going to be talking about the strategies and tools that you can implement to be better organized with your finances. And the very first tip is hiring a good bookkeeper. So I do have a little teaser here that if you like, you can ask me about special rates for Connect Ottawa members. There'll be contact information at the end of the presentation, how to get in touch with me. And I just want to talk about what a bookkeeper is, because it's a question that I get asked a lot, which is, what is the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant? So I'm going to throw it out to the group here and maybe ask Bernie as an example. What do you think the difference is between a bookkeeper and an accountant?
You know, Jen, that was actually floating through my mind. What could possibly be the difference? And I suspect the difference is the bookkeeper is the one that actually keeps the books, as in keeps the numbers flowing in the right columns and in the right categories. The accountant then structures that environment so that for tax purposes and reporting purposes that it will follow suit with certain guidelines that are GAAP approved. And the GAAP is the generally accepted and accounting principles. Hey, I remembered actually what the acronym meant. That's pretty good. So that's my general take on it. I'm sure there's more depth. There are some bookkeepers that have more knowledge base, but the accountant piece is a little more sophisticated. It's more than just counting the numbers, counting the shekels that come in. I think it's also how to forecast and how to map out your numbers and your projections. How'd I do?
Wow, A+. Like you can run the webinar. That is actually a very excellent explanation. So yes, the bookkeeper keeps the books and the accountant is more there for strategy and advice. An interesting thing to note that some people might not be aware of is you don't have to be an accountant to do taxes. And not all people that do taxes are accountants. So I really like to delve into Q&A when I get approached by a potential client or a friend just seeking advice. when someone says they're looking for an accountant, I'll ask them, well, what do you actually need? Do you need advice on whether you should incorporate? Do you need to do HST remittances? Do you need to do payroll? Do you need a Section 85 rollover? Do you need tax advice? Do you just need someone to help you implement apps to keep better track of your invoices? And each of those things might be best suited to a different person. So it's really important to understand as a business owner, when you're going into this, what you actually need and finding that person that can match that need. So when we're talking about a bookkeeper, we're talking about somebody that keeps the books. And what that means is keeping track of invoices to your customers, so that's your sales, keeping track of expenses, keeping track of HST ITCs, which is the credit you get back for HST on expenses. All those sorts of things, making sure that expenses are categorized in the right place so that as a business owner, when you're looking at your financial statements, you have an accurate picture as to what's going on in your business. So the first step as a business owner is hiring that bookkeeper to help you stay organized. Another thing that I often get asked is, when is the right time to hire a bookkeeper? And the answer is basically when you start running your business, but acknowledging that, you know, when you first start running a business, there can be lots of upfront costs. And so maybe it's not necessarily in your budget. It would be good at least to hire somebody on a one-off consulting basis to set you up correctly, because what I see very often in my practice is somebody will sign up for QuickBooks, not understand the system, and start basically tinkering with the system, and then 6 months later not really understand what happened, and then they'll have to actually pay more to have someone come in and fix it, versus paying just a little bit of money up front to have someone come in and show them how the different tools and software works. So it's really important to set that stage for success early. And something I'll be talking about later on in the presentation is the cost of procrastination. So the second tip that I have here is investing in apps. And I have a really big caveat, which is when it makes sense to do so. So it's very easy in this day and age to get shiny object syndrome. There's so many cool applications out there. There's so much marketing being targeted. As soon as you become a business owner or an entrepreneur, all the algorithms on social media are getting very good at driving certain ads our way and saying, you need HubSpot, you need Salesforce, you need MailChimp. Just by a show of hands, can I see how many people have seen those types of ads? Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So applications can be great, but we have to remember that they're just a tool to accomplish something. So I'll give you an example. Somebody might think, oh, I'm a new business owner, I should get QuickBooks. Very common thing. And I will put out a caveat that I think QuickBooks is an amazing system. It's the one that I specialize in. So I truly believe they have an excellent product, but I also believe there's a time and a place to use it. So some business owners are very tech savvy and they're completely comfortable using Excel. So let's say that you're a business owner and you're using Excel to keep track of your invoices and your expenses. And then at the end of the year, you hand that off to the person that's doing your tax return. And let's say that's working for you. There's no reason for you to get QuickBooks necessarily. The important thing is that you have a system that's working for you. So some people might have a very high emotional aversion to spreadsheets. They just don't like looking at spreadsheets. They don't want to use them. So in that case, investing in a tool like QuickBooks is a good idea because it's going to cause them to have a positive association with their books versus a negative association if they know they have to fill out a spreadsheet. So it's all about what really works for you. Another example would be things like customer relationship management software programs. So if you're the type of entrepreneur that has, say, half a dozen government contracts, and that's what you do throughout the year, it might not make sense for you to invest in a CRM. But if you are, say, running Upspace and you have hundreds of hosts and hundreds of renters that you're needing to keep track of all the activity, then it makes sense to invest in a CRM because it is much better to keep track of all of that activity. But if you have a couple of government grants and that's your consulting program, you don't need a fancy system to keep track of that. Excel is perfectly fine. So when I do consulting with my clients, we'll go through and we'll identify, what applications make the most sense for you. And also what makes sense from a budget perspective, because going back to the shiny object syndrome, it's very easy to start signing up for all of these apps. And then all of a sudden your monthly expenses are creeping up and up and up and up. And you're like, man, I didn't think it was that expensive when I signed up, but there was a 3-month promotion, and then the 4th month kicks in and it's twice the price. And then that happens over 6 applications. And all of a sudden you have all these costs, and it's not actually helping your business. It might even be giving you like anxiety or a bit of a headache because you don't really understand what these applications are doing for you. So it's very important to understand what you need and then finding somebody that can help you find the right fit. I'm just going to stop there for a second and see if there's any questions.
I got a couple of questions. So what type of apps would you recommend for the person that is not a, like when you talk about spreadsheets, I'm used to using spreadsheets, but I don't like being in them because for me to make an error is a higher probability, right? And you know, to catch the error would mean I'm paying attention to the sum totals, and I might not catch it as quick as opposed to other platforms which kind of sort things out. So other than QuickBooks, what other software do you recommend for someone who is in the startup mode to be around them, to keep themselves organized and, you know, keep the flow through that does the Q&A check or quality checks?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I will get to other apps, but I'm first going to touch on something called integrity control in spreadsheets. So in a past life, I did a lot of analytical work for large organizations. And one of the things that we had to do was build spreadsheets that were error proof. And so there's actually ways that you can build formulas into your spreadsheets to catch human error. So if you do that, you might not actually need to find a different system. You might be able to still use the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet can track your errors, and then that solves that problem. However, if you're interested in a system other than spreadsheets and other than QuickBooks, Wave is another good introductory bookkeeping system. However, the unfortunate thing with Wave is it's not the most friendly when it comes to preparing tax returns. So there's a lot of professionals who prepare tax returns that will charge you a premium for having Wave. Okay. However, Wave is free on a monthly basis. So then you have to weigh the pros and cons of not paying anything throughout the year, but potentially paying more when it's time to do your tax return.
Well, quick question on regards to tax returns and keeping things simple. So what makes the business transactions more complicated from tax purposes versus like, hi, I buy a widget and I sell the widget spiffed up, you know, it's next level. Either it's a through and through, or it's I modify the widget and then sell it. Is there a type of business where, you know, I'm doing widgets and I'm doing puppy dogs and you know, Girl Guide cookies as a sidebar? You know, what makes it more complicated? Where, you know, does it matter what type of business you are in, or in the Wave application, is it just a simple straight through and through that would be adequate and won't cause you headaches?
Great question. So I'm just making some notes so I can cover some of the differences. So the first thing is, you might be in business as a sole proprietor and you might be in business as an incorporation. If you are in business as a sole proprietor, it's not more complicated because everything is flowing through your personal tax return. So it's more complicated in the sense that there's more volume of stuff, but it's not necessarily more complicated. If you're an incorporation, then that opens you up to filling out basically a whole bunch of additional forms when you do your taxes. So that's the added complication. And that's why corporate tax returns cost so much, is because there's so many forms that need to be filled out. Another factor is whether you're a service business or a product-based business, because if you're a product-based business, you're going to be keeping track of inventory, you're going to be keeping track of cost of goods sold, versus a service business like a therapist, they just have their service-based consultations. So that's a lot simpler to keep track of. And then the third thing is whether you're registered for HST. So when you're first starting out a business, there's a certain level of sales where underneath that threshold, you don't need to be registered for HST. And then after that you do. So if you are registered for HST, that's an additional complication for a tax time. Okay, any other questions?
If you're starting up a business and you don't figure you're going to hit the 30,000, right, as the threshold for HST. Does it matter if you register for HST, or is that only if you're going for government contracts?
No, it's independent of government contracts. It's just basically the CRA has set a threshold to say if you're under this, then you don't have to worry about charging HST. There's no downside to registering it for it beforehand. You can register for HST as soon as you have a business, even if you're making under 30,000. That just means when you're sending out invoices to your customers, you're charging HST, and then you're sending it straight to CRA. And then once you reach that 30,000, you don't have to worry about it because you've already done it. But if you decide to wait until you reach that threshold, that's fine as well. The only way you could get into trouble is if you surpass that threshold and you haven't registered for HST.
Okay.
So as I was speaking about earlier, QuickBooks is a great system for all levels of businesses. They have some really affordable startup packages that provide access to a mind-boggling amount of tools that can make your life a lot easier. And one of those tools is the app, which you can download on your phone. So if you are a business owner and you're out and about, whether it's doing meals and entertainment, paying for gas, paying for office supplies, you can actually use the QuickBooks app, which is included when you buy a subscription. You take a picture of your receipt, it uploads to the cloud, and then your bookkeeper can take it from there. So it's just a very user-friendly system. And again, I will say I like QuickBooks, but Wave has a similar functionality where you can take a picture of receipt, upload it into the system. So there's lots of different ways to help you stay organized. And again, just going over the pros and cons of the apps, you can gain efficiencies, you can track data. As an accountant, I'm a big data nerd. I love having data to analyze, and it's great for that. There's also some affordable starter plans. It can be sexy and exciting, but some of the cons are it can add up quickly if you're not paying attention. It can be difficult to manage. You can end up spending more time on the learning curve to learn the apps than running your business, and upgrades can be annoying sometimes. So the third tip for reducing stress at tax time is scheduling it. And if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that we're all short on time. Time seems to be this thing that we just can't get. We just never have enough. And so I always, when I'm working with my clients, I will always tell them, you will not find time. You have to make time for these things. And finances is a great example of that. So one of the things that I offer is monthly CFO check-ins where we schedule a 1-hour meeting and we go over any concerns, any questions the client may have about their finances. So what this does is it's not just about what we're discussing, it's the fact that we're discussing it and that we've set aside a time. So the client is prioritizing their business finances. And as a business owner, I can appreciate that it's very easy to kick this proverbial can down the road when it comes to finances because there's always something more important happening. There's a fire you have to put out, there's a customer you need to talk to, but the reality is your business finances are just as important because it's very easy for things to start snowballing and become out of control if you don't have that regularly scheduled check-in. So whatever works for you, whether it's putting time in your Google Calendar or if you have a notebook. I have a notebook where I write everything down because they say that your brain treats things differently once you write it on pen and paper. So I find that to be very helpful, but really it's just doing whatever works for you for scheduling it in. Just wanted to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about for this slide. Oh yes, so the other thing is by scheduling it in, you're telling yourself that it's important. And you're providing a bit of relief for yourself mentally. So I'm sure we've all been in this situation where you're running through your brain and you're thinking about all the things that you need to do. But if you know that you've scheduled Friday to talk about bookkeeping with Jen, you kind of give your brain an opportunity to relax in terms of that part of your mental anguish. And you can say, it's okay because I know I'm talking about it on Friday. But if you haven't set aside that time to talk about it on Friday, your brain is just going to be stressing out thinking, how am I going to deal with this question I don't know the answer to? So like I was saying at the beginning of this presentation, it's not just about the technical pieces of bookkeeping and accounting, but it's also the processes and procedures that are going to reduce that mental anguish that you have about these finances.
Jenn, I've got a question for you. Just back to the
Sure.
scheduling. How much time should a person allot of, to meet on a regular basis, A, to start up, meet on a regular basis, and then for tax prep time. Like kind of a rule of thumb based on the nature of what they're doing.
Yeah, so to start, I'd say 1 day a month you should dedicate to the finances of your business.
Okay.
And then that can be less or more depending on what needs to get done. So the fourth tip, just looking at the time here, and we seem to be doing good. The fourth tip is measuring it. So there's a bit of a trend here. You might have noticed scheduling it, measuring it. These things are not difficult. They just require discipline and consistency. So what does it mean to measure your finances? Well, it's more than just looking at the money that's in your bank account. It's very easy to think, oh, well, I have X dollars in my bank account, so everything's fine. But maybe there's a big bill coming due, or maybe there is a client that's owed a refund. And so it's really important to know, what does your cash conversion cycle look like? What is a cash conversion cycle? Do you have any aged receivables? There's ways that we can measure the success and the status of our business. Other ways could be how much you're paying in accounting fees. How many people have gotten a bookkeeper or an accounting invoice and they thought, whoa, that's a lot more money than I thought. It happens quite a bit. So that's another way that you could measure. You could measure your business by figuring out how much interest expense you're paying because you're not paying your credit card bills on time or you're not paying the full balance. You could look at how much you have in aged accounts receivable. Maybe you have a client that's not paying you on a timely basis, but you're not aware of that because you have so many other things you're juggling as a business owner. So having this bookkeeper look at these trends for you and having the ability to discuss them on that monthly basis will really help set the stage for making things much less stressful. So I pulled this data from a recent report, 2019, and I had to double check it to make sure it wasn't a typo, but this is correct. $1.18 billion, identified by the CRA just from small and medium businesses, so not big businesses, in 2019. So don't be that business that the CRA goes, hey, you missed this income, because apparently there are a lot of them. So the final tip in the 5 tips for reducing your stress and keeping your books organized is checking in. I'm a pretty big advocate of this, and it really boils down to, again, the accountability and the organization piece. So I'm sure that we've all had that situation where a tax preparer or a bank, maybe you're applying for a loan, there's just some reason that you need to recall something that happened 10 months ago. Oh, there was this transaction, X amount went out of the bank account. Can you tell me what that was? And you're going, nope, I don't remember. That was 10 months ago. I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So that's why it's really important to keep regular check-ins, whether it's with your bookkeeper or your accountant or your business friend. Maybe you have a buddy and together the two of you decide we're going to talk about our finances. If you're comfortable doing that, obviously once a month, and that helps you to check in regularly and be aware of what's going on. Yeah, another thing to think about is depending on the contract that you have with your accountant or your bookkeeper, they may charge you for this time. So we have to remember that the accountants and the bookkeepers are professionals and service providers, and that this is part of the service that they're offering. So there can be a lot of value to having that check-in time, even if it's billed as in like charged for, because it reduces the amount that the bill will be at the end of the year from things not being organized. So I believe my next slide, yes. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is very true in this instance because it's much more digestible and much more reasonable to have that monthly bill for your bookkeeping or for your accounting rather than having this huge bill at the end of the year because nobody knew, the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand and wasn't aware of what was happening. So as I alluded to, I think at the beginning of the presentation, there are some special promotions for Connect Ottawa members. Some of the services that I offer are monthly bookkeeping, where there's a flat fee, which varies depending on the size of your business. And then I also do the CFO consulting side of the business, which is that monthly check-in that I talked about, where we address concerns that you might have, and some clients decide to do both of those things. So if you're interested in either of those things, this is how you can reach me.